Tonight, we have 11 programs left on the Fox News Channel, and we wanted to bring a history one more time, at least one more time in the next 11 days. And we want to talk to David Barton, Josh Charles, and Chris Stewart. Before we went into the break, I asked David to help out on a story. It's one of my favorite news stories of George Washington, new for me, where they were at the Constitutional Convention, and they are arguing back and forth. Josh, you probably know this too. Arguing back and forth, and I think it was New York that said, "You got to help us out. I mean, we got to have something here because we weren't even sent to do this job." And Washington spoke up and he said, "We can't compromise." And I'm paraphrasing. He was much more eloquent than I could ever be, but he said, "How can we live with ourselves at the end if we would now compromise here with this opportunity? We have to do the right thing." He said, "The event is in the hand of God. Let us raise
a standard.
Let us raise a standard.
Yeah, to which the wise and just can repair."
Do you believe that he expected us, that we are now to be the wise and just? That we're not,
yeah,
but we need to be.
He also gave a speech after that where he said that Providence has plainly put it in the hands of the people, and if it gets off track, it'll be the people, but I can't believe that will ever happen. I mean, his optimism was so high, and that's what he expressed. John Adams, shortly after that, gave a speech where he says, every citizen has to become for himself a statesman. He has to judge and read every legislative act, because that's the only way you can hold them accountable, is you have to know what they're doing, because they'll tell you stuff. So they went through and talked, and it's really kind of a different time frame in that they had a representative government, but they did it very differently than what we do today. If you look at their elections they had back then, any candidate who put himself forward for office was automatically disqualified for office. You went into the polling booth with a blank piece of paper, and on it you said, I want Glenn Beck for mayor, and I want Josh to be my senator, and then they would count up the names. They'd go, they chose you for mayor, you going to be mayor? And you had a choice at that point. You never ran for office. People recognized their leaders. They said, if you...
That's fantastic.
The statement that Sam Adams said was, if you put yourself forward for office, you will become a dangerous party man.
Can I tell you something?
And that was his statement.
In my church, it's all done with callings like that. You don't become a bishop. You're called.
That's right.
And I was told, when I first joined my church, they said, if you ever want a calling, or you ever want to be a bishop, You'll never
make it. That's right.
And I said immediately, I am printing up buttons back for bishop.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's campaign on that. Let me go to Scott, because I think you kind of have a question that kind of fits here.
Well, I know one of the recurring themes has been kind of the contest between good and evil, and one of the things that always concerned me during the period of slavery is why more Southern Christians weren't morally stand up and understand the moral imperative and why slavery was so wrong. And did it boil down to economics? And also, why were we the only country in the world that actually fought a war over emancipation? All the other countries in Europe didn't do that.
Fun stuff.
And why did men of goodwill turn a blind eye to it for so long, or seemingly goodwill, which kind of seems to be a theme today, that we have people of goodwill that turn a blind eye to the morally right thing to do. Yeah, so that's kind of the whole discussion on today.
Before you start, let me just say this. Why are so many people turning a blind eye to sex slavery that is still going on all around the world, that is going, stoning of homosexuals in Iran, and we don't really seem to care, to abortion, whatever. You can name them, and it seems as though people are asleep. People are no different, are they, now than they were then, on turning a blind eye? You can come up with a million different reasons for it.
I think we have a tendency to be less involved now, because we watch things on TV and we elect people to represent us, and every member of Congress has 670,000 constituents. I'm just one. They won't listen to me. I don't have... And so we have talked ourselves by the tens of millions into thinking that we're impotent and have no ability to do anything. That, I think, is one difference from previous generations, is that we have a mentality that says, I can't make a difference. And yet the polling numbers still remain consistently high. This week, 61% of the nation said that having an abortion is morally wrong. That's a pretty strong number. 62% today came out and said, we think marriage should be a man and a woman only, no exceptions. That's strong. But we don't see that kind of political impetus going, although the numbers are high. But going back to the slavery thing, when John Quincy Adams finished his term as President of the United States, 1825, 1829, he went in, the only president ever become a member of Congress, and he went in with a nickname, the Hellhound of Abolition. He was not going to let go of that issue till he ended slavery. That was his nickname throughout. He spent 17 years as a one-issue congressman, and when he got there, he looked around at all the representatives, and the overwhelming majority were from the northern states that are anti-slavery. They've already ended slavery. He said the difficulty we have in Congress is they keep looking at slavery as an economic issue, not a moral issue. He said, if we can't make it a moral issue, if we keep it an economic issue, we'll never end it. Well, it finally became a moral issue because of things like the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850, 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, all this other stuff going on. You had a lot of... Go ahead.
Isn't it interesting that what's happening now in America, everything, capitalism, it's becoming a moral issue. Mm-hmm. That capitalism hurts people. The border issue is, everything. Yeah. Everything is social justice.
That's right.
Everything is so. Is that where that came from?
Well, that came actually after the Civil War. It didn't come from back there at that point in time, because they still had the clarity of not making things that were not moral into moral issues. Now we try to shroud everything with a moral respectability, and that tells us we're supposed to automatically back off and allow it, but it's not. But you do have the issue that when the people finally recognized as a moral issue, the election of 1861, the people overwhelmingly said, we want a platform. We've got a Republican platform for president, for House and Senate. We want them in. They promised to abolish slavery. 11 planks, 9 of them abolished slavery. They put them in. It was then that half the Congress resigned and said, these guys, if they're going to abolish slavery, we're leaving. We're not going. We always say the South seceded from the North. It was not. It was a group of political leaders who said, we're not going to be a part of ending slavery. And that was the inability of Congress to handle what the people had said through elections. They refused to do what the people said.
Back in just a second. Tonight we're talking a little bit about history with David Barton, Josh Charles, and Chris Stewart. Chris, we were talking in the break about the power of the individual in your book about tipping points. I'm struck by the fact that there are these moments that aren't necessarily leaders that it's taken by.
It can be an individual. You know, in this case, he emerged into a great leader, but it's hard for us, I think, to understand what a crisis and what a pivotal moment the Civil War was for our nation, and by extension, the rest of the world. Because what would the next century have been like had we not had a united United States? It was imperative that this nation stay together. And of all the people who hated Abraham Lincoln in the South, there were about as many who hated him in the North. He didn't have very many friends. And if you read the press at the time, that becomes very, very clear. He must have felt, I am alone, so many times. And yet, really the story of hope that comes out of that, here was a man who stood up to do what he felt was right against opposition from almost every corner. And yet, what a difference it made. And it was one of those tipping points that, you know, he changed not just the future of this country, but the future of the world because of that courage. What
would the founders tell us, or the Federalist Papers tell us, about our role? How do we prepare people to be Abraham Lincoln, or that person, the guy in the front of the tank at Tiananmen Square?
Sure. Well, the authors of the Federalist Papers make very clear that a moral and virtuous people ultimately solve the problem, and they keep the system going. Benjamin Franklin himself thought the system would fail after 50 or so years in his call for unanimity. He says, at the end of this, the people will be prepared for nothing less than despotic government. But it's kept going because of morally virtuous people, and I believe that in this day and age, people of faith will make the difference. In Isaiah, they're called repairers of the breach when the exiles are coming back from Babylon. Chronicles, the Lord is looking throughout the land to look for those whose hearts are fully committed to them and to strengthen them. They're going to make the difference. When you go to Wilmington and you show the power of prayer, I mean, the fact, I still talk with Robin Morris, and she's had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people from all over the country, even other countries, who have come, and they just want to set up prayer houses. People of faith will make the difference. All these problems will begin to be solved there.
So how much time here, Aaron? Can I take it on the other side? Can I take that minute on the other side? Okay, I want to take a break because I want to go to Lori Martini. Basically on that point, I think in a way, what could be the most recent tipping point. We'll do that next. Lori, how are you?
I'm excellent.
Where are you from?
Longport, New Jersey.
I'm sorry for that. All right, I'm kidding.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
I wanted to know what you feel is the most recent tipping point, and in particular, if this country's support or lack of support for Israel is going to become the cause of a tipping point.
Who wants to take
Well,
it?
I tell you, historically, that has always been a tipping point for nations, the way they treat it. And I've got to go back to what the Founding Fathers did at the Constitutional Convention. Because when you look at what George Mason said and what Luther Martin said, they got into the aspect of national accountability. They said every one of us will account to God, but nations also account to God. And it was George Mason who pointed out that nations don't account to God in the next world, they count in this world. So if you believe that there's a God, if you believe that we are accountable to God, and you take something as simple as Genesis 12:3, where he makes a perpetual covenant, and he tells Abraham and his descendants, however they treat you, that's how I'm going to treat them. They bless you, I'll bless you.
That stinks on ice.
Yeah. But that's what you see historically, whether it be through the Middle Ages, through World War I, through World War II, through modern history, the position that a nation takes toward Israel determines their economic fate and their political fate more than
Name the
anything else.
countries, Josh. Quick, go!
Syria, Rome, Babylon, Germany. All the above.
You know,
Chris.
I might make a more practical rather than a historical observation. That is this, and I probably shouldn't say this in my time in the military. I had a chance to work and train and exercise with countries from all throughout that region. And one observation I took away from that I'm certain of, and that is Israel is our closest and perhaps only true friend in that part of the world.
Oh yeah.
And if they are our ally, and they are, we need to recognize that and
I'm
protect
convinced it is the end of the West if we don't support them and they fall. It is the end of the West and our lifestyle. Agree?
Agree.
Agree?
Yeah.
Agree? Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Stinks on ice too, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it does. All right. Let me see if I can get one more quick question. Yes, Peter.
Len, when do you think this apathy started? Is there a historical time point that you can point to in the country where people started to move away from believing in their politicians and paying attention?
Woodrow Wilson.
And how many generations of apathy do we have to undo?
Well, Woodrow Wilson is in a period really of great economic prosperity. And in the scriptures, God told his people, you're going to get that prosperity, and when you do, you're going to forget me. When you forget me, it's going to sink.
It really was. This is a time bomb that was planted, you know, starting with Teddy Roosevelt, the progressive era, time bomb planted. And they started the ball rolling. They thought it would go off a lot sooner, I think, than it has. But this is it. This is when the time period is. Now it requires us to do our own homework, do our own research, and return to the basics and the principles. Back in just a second. Special thanks to our guests tonight, Chris Stewart, 7 Tipping Points, Joshua Charles, and from allbuilders.com, David Barton. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow with a quiz show. The things you learned on this show, or did you? Tomorrow night from New York. Good night, America.